Welcome back, guys. Today we're going to continue looking at the Industrial Revolution and just how revolutionary it was. And we're going to do that in a foldable today. We're going to look at the advances of the Industrial Revolution. So what you're going to want to do, take your piece of paper, whatever you're creating your foldable on, take the outsides, fold them to meet in the middle. You will get a picture of this on your Canvas page so you can see what the front is supposed to look like. But we're going to be looking at textiles, factories, mass production, transportation, four things that you saw major advancements in during the Industrial Revolution, all of which had major implications on the world then and today. So inside your foldable, you're going to cut, so you have four doors. You should have the four flaps for each of the four groups we're going to talk about. But you're going to take notes on the inside of those off of this PowerPoint right here. So we're going to look at, like I said, advances of the Industrial Revolution. And so, first, we're going to look at textiles. So again, you do not have to write everything that you see here word for word. You can put it in your own words. You can shorten. You can summarize, whichever it is that you need to do. But before the Industrial Revolution, so textiles has to do with cloth, clothes, sewing things together. And before that, all of your spinners, all your weavers, all your sewers, they were having to do this by hand. So they're at home putting everything together by hand. Cotton is spun by hand into thread. Then it's sewn up together, threaded, combined, braided, woven, whatever word you want to use. And then they would take that cotton cloth that was put together, and then they would take it to an artisan or a person who would then dye it. And this is all known as the cottage industry, cottage being their home, and they worked from home. You could argue that in 2020, during this pandemic, maybe we're all, or a lot of people are involved in a cottage industry of some sort, working from home. But this is known as the cottage industry or the domestic system. It is a very, very slow process, not at the fault of the people doing the work. It's just that the process is slow, having to peel the seeds out of the cotton, then having to take the cotton and thread by thread it together, and then, then take it, wove it all together, put it all together in the form of whatever blanket, shirt, sweater you're trying to make. Then take it to the person who's going to dye it the color that you need it to be dyed. It's just a very long, tedious process. And that is why the Industrial Revolution is important, because what you see are four inventions that come about that kind of change the way of thinking. It changes the way that they do stuff. And those are the flying shuttle, spinning jenny, water frame, and the spinning mule. If you, there's going to be a separate slide on each of these. But the old ways of making cloth all kind of transforms. Again, we talked about it. The Industrial Revolution is all about how can we take these raw materials and turn them into finished goods the fastest. Because the faster the goods are done, the faster the goods are put together, the faster we can get them out, and we can trade them, and we can make money off them, we can sell them, the faster they can be on the market. And so the goal is to take what was initially a very slow, long, tedious process in the form of textiles and speed it up so that we can make more textiles at a faster, quicker rate so that we can make more money. So number one is the flying shuttle. It is still hand operated, but you can see it weaves cloth at a much faster rate. So the flying shuttle, created by John Kay, spins cloth or weaves cloth at a higher, faster, more quick rate. The spinning jenny was created by James Hargreaves. He named it after his wife. But what it allows is one person could spin 16 threads at once. So as opposed to being able to spin 2 threads at once, maybe 3 if you're really good with your hands, all of a sudden you can spin 16. And you can, again, combine that with the flying shuttle, and all of a sudden this idea of weaving cloth and working these machines together is starting to speed up that process. Make it much faster. The water frame is invented by Richard Arkwright, and it is a water-powered spinner. It gets the cloth and the threads through the machine faster so that you can get them separated and whatnot. So the water frame, again, the goal being to be faster and quicker and faster and quicker. And how can we make this process expedited and finish these goods more quickly? The last one is the spinning mule. It's the fastest of them all. Not only is it the fastest, but it also produces the best thread. I mean, you can see here all of the thread that's going into the machine all around it. But the thing that's also important to note here is that you couldn't have these machines in your homes. You couldn't have these machines just sitting in an extra room that you had somewhere. So you see a shift away from the cottage industry or away from working from home and more towards our next flap on our foldable, factories. Factories become a much bigger thing during the Industrial Revolution because, like we just talked about, these inventions that are being created to make these goods even faster, you can't have them at home. And so because the spinning mule needed water on top of how large it was, producers start to set up factories. They build buildings specifically designed to work in. And they build theirs, these cloth factories, these textile factories are being built near streams where they could set up water wheels. And these water wheels would bring the water that you needed to operate the machines and then to power the rest of the factory through hydropower, because hydro stands for water. And these factories are just places where workers and machines are brought together. And then together, these workers and these machines are producing large quantities, very, very big amounts of goods so that you could sell them and trade them faster and quicker. And you had more of them to make even more money off of. And so again, the goal is just to produce as many goods as you can at the fastest rate as you can. And so now we've moved from textiles and the cottage industry to the creation of factories, and then factories and textiles are starting to show just how expedited and how quick this process can be. And so that leads to this new idea or advancement known as, which is our next flap, mass production. Mass production is when you create large numbers of the very same things, identical things. And two things that become very important in the mass producing system are interchangeable parts. So parts that you can just swap them in and out. You just make a bunch of the same ones. This one's defective, take it out, put the new one on, boom, it allows it to keep moving. And the assembly line. So instead of one person doing the same thing or creating the entire thing from start to finish, you just have one person who's in charge of the first step, and all day they just did the first step. And then they passed it on down the assembly line to the person who was in charge of step 2. And they just did step 2 all day. And then they passed it on. And it just kept moving, and it kept moving. Think of it like if you were creating goodie bags. Let's say you were creating goodie bags for a birthday party. You have 5 people sitting around a table trying to create these goodie bags. Well, person number 1, their job is to put the little Dollar Tree toy in the bag. And then they pass it to number 2, and their job is to put the candy in the bag. And they pass it to number 3, whose job it is to put a thank you note and thank you for coming note in the bag. And then they pass it to number 4, who seals it with the little twist tie. And then that just goes around, and it keeps going, and then person number 5 takes them and sets them up on the table. And then that assembly line allowed things to be done more efficiently. They were able to be done faster, as opposed to just having one person who would go from station to station to get everything they needed, and it would just keep starting over. Well, they would just do the same task over and over and over again, which made the assembly line much, much faster. Interchangeable parts, these are identical machine-made parts. Again, these would be if one piece was defective or it wasn't working or something didn't go right. You just take it out, put another one in, boom, we're ready to go. On top of the interchangeable parts, all of these parts are made. They're all right here. It's what allowed the assembly line to work. You have a large number of whatever material or good it is that you need. But the assembly line or production that moves from worker to worker, and these items are ended up being made faster, much quicker through this mass producing system. And so we talked about the textile industry and how it's changed, and the textile industry kind of leads to the creation of factories. And once factories are created, that leads to this idea of mass production by way of interchangeable parts and the assembly line. And then that kind of leads to increases in transportation. These are your factories right here. And the interchangeable parts and the assembly line, you can see right here in automobiles. And this is much later, but you can see that these ideas continue throughout time. And even still today, cars are made via interchangeable parts and the assembly line. People do each step as it rolls along. People just keep doing their part. Now, all the parts that they need to do their section are right here. And as it goes from section to section, it gets its next piece, and then it gets its next piece until it is finished. So transportation improves during the Industrial Revolution because in the early 1800s, George Stephenson invents steam-powered trains. So he sees how water is able to power various things in the factories, whether they're machines or the factories themselves. And so he tries to find another way to increase energy. And so he comes up with steam power and puts it on a train. And this allows carts or goods or materials to be pulled along rails. And these railroads and these trains increase trade. It makes trade faster. So now we've created goods faster. Now we've found a way to get the goods to the place we need them to go even faster. So now the idea of what's the most efficient and the fastest way that we can make the most money has gone from one good, being textiles, to multiple goods being able to be created in the factories. And so then, through machines, but then how can we make the human and machine work together to get all these goods created even faster? Then we come up with mass production. Now we have large quantities, but now it's like, well, what do we do with these large quantities? So we take the same ideas from the Industrial Revolution, we apply it to trains. And we put these large mass-produced quantities of goods on these trains, and we send them out on rails. That's why they're called railroads. They're roads made up of rails. On these rails to their destinations. And so Britain starts to connect these rails one to another, and it allows them to ship them all throughout Britain. But then Britain realizes we can build these across countries, across continents even. And so you see an increase in the number of railroads, and the trains are being created through the mass production systems in the factories that were put together by textiles. All of this loops together. One thing leads to another, which leads to another, which leads to another. And so eventually the trains get so good, we figure out, hey, we can put people on these. And it all starts to grow and expand exponentially. And so you see railroads are being built in between various regions. So you got regions here where this is natural resources are, iron. So you build a railroad to a machinery factory here where goods are being made. And then that same railroad goes up here to more machinery factories. But then you have cotton and textiles here. So you could take them and that you could use to trade to get the iron. All right. And so railroads are being built all through. This is just a portion of England, but it ends up expanding to grow even throughout all of Europe. And so we take that idea and we go even further. Robert Fulton takes the steam engine that was invented by James Watt and improves on it and puts it on a boat. And all of a sudden we come up with the steamboat. And so what allowed us to ship goods via rails on land even faster, all of a sudden we have a new faster way to ship goods over water even faster. And that's via the steamboat. And so again, the idea is the same. It's how can we get these mass-produced goods to the place that we need them to be the fastest? All right, we're going to stop here for today. You guys do have an assignment on Canvas to do that has to do with advancements made during the Industrial Revolution. Our next video is going to be about other technologies that were developed as a result of the Industrial Revolution and the effects of the Industrial Revolution. So reach out to me if you have any questions. Go on Canvas, look for your assignment, complete that. Let me know if you need help. And as always, have a great day.